Hi there, welcome back to my channel. My name is Regina, and in today's video I'm going to show you guys how I maximize the space in my garden by growing my pole beans and my yard-long beans along my fence. I'm going to be just using a little bit of wire and string as the trellis, using the fence structure as the structure, and then building a 1 foot wide by 6 foot long raised bed in order to actually plant the beans. So that sounds like something you'd be interested in. Let's get started. When you want to grow a lot of food in a small amount of space, you have to get creative. And so that's what I'm doing today. I've grown pole beans in different raised beds across arch trellises before, but something I haven't done yet is actually utilize my current wooden fence structure. I have a big one that goes all the way around my backyard in order to actually grow those beans. Now my fence has metal posts holding up the wood, and so those are really strong. So I'm going to utilize those by tying wire and string, and those are going to be the trellis that are going to be the perfect growing space for my pole beans and my yard-long beans. And then on the ground, I'm just going to make a little raised bed, and I'll be able to plant the beans in that. And so I'm going to use 4 full panels of my fence to grow those beans, which means I should be able to grow plenty of beans for my family for the next year. So to build this raised bed, I'm using pieces of scrap wood that I have left over from last year whenever I had my fence moved, or I had my part of my fence essentially replaced and moved forward so I can have more backyard space. I kept the leftover wood and I've used it so far to make this big keyhole bed behind me, but then I still have pieces left. So I'm going to use these to make the little mini raised beds that are going to go along my fence. So since these are 6 feet wide, 6 feet long, that's how long the bed is going to be. And then I'm going to use a fence picket and cut it into 1 foot pieces to make the width, to make the side of the post. And it's only going to be this high, 5.5 inches off the ground. I don't need it to be super deep for green beans. Plus, I'll put cardboard or newspaper along the bottom of it, and so the roots can grow down below where the bed is as well. So it doesn't have to be that deep. So first, I've already marked this board into 1 foot pieces because this will be used for my widths. And I'm going to get these cut. I have a little, or kind of a big circular saw here that I'm going to use to cut them. So you don't need fancy tools to kind of get creative in the garden. I actually borrowed this one from my dad because I don't have a saw. Well, I have a hand saw, but I know this would be easier. I've used it once before. I'm no expert, but I can make some straight cuts on pieces of wood. So I've gotten all of my wood cut. Essentially these boards, these fence pickets I'm using at the size that they are, so I don't have to cut them. And then these, like I mentioned, I cut to 1 foot. These are going to be like my edges. And then I cut these pieces. This is another piece of the fence, I think across the top or whatever. But I cut this one into 5.5 inch pieces because that's the width of the boards. So I'm using these as like my corner like braces to hold it together. There are like metal braces or whatever that you can buy, but why buy something when I can just use scrap wood, right? And then the screws I'm using, I want to say these are about 1.5 to 2 inches. And I had these left over from when I had my, sorry, somebody's driving by my house. I had these left over from when I had my rain gutters on my fence last year. Last summer I tried that out, growing strawberries and rain gutters on the fence. It did not work out. It's just too hot here. They dried out too quickly. But you know what? That's why you try things to see if they work. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So I took those down, but I still have all the screws, so I can use those for this. Since this wood isn't very thick, it's fencing wood, so these screws should work perfectly fine for it. So if you want to see more amateur carpentry and power tool usage, I have a drill this time. Let's get it going. So here is what the box looks like completed. I'm trying to avoid my shadow, but I guess I can't completely. Yeah, so very crude carpentry, but it does the job. And made of old wood, and I found enough screws that I had in the toolbox from other projects. So great. I love when I build something, I don't have to buy anything new. And then underneath them, I always put under my raised beds. And oh, by the way, just a reminder, these are 6 feet long, because that was the length of the fence picket and it worked perfectly. And I just made them 1 foot wide, because as you can see here, through my little aisle, I still have some space to work this raised bed, etc. And then I had some cardboard boxes in my garage. So I used those to go underneath, because of course they'll help to kind of suppress the grass that's under there, but they will eventually break down because the roots likely will grow down through this box, because this box is only 5.5 inches high, which is plenty for green beans and for pole beans and yard long beans. So I have all 4 of them completed. Yeah, and this is day 2. Yesterday we started getting a teeny bit of rain and lightning, and since I was using a drill, I needed to pack it up and go in because I don't want to die of electrocution. That would be a really sad way to go. Well, a really dumb way to go. Using a drill in the rain. So I decided to pack it up, and so I just finished these today, and yeah. So here you can see behind me, everything is built. Here is the trellis. It's made of wire, I guess it's called wire. The same wire I used to make my blackberry trellis. And then string. I don't know what this is made of, like tweed or, I don't know. It's some string. Jute or cotton, I'm not 100% sure what this is made of. I bought it last year, but it's a pretty strong string. And I just tied the wire, or wrapped the wire around the top of the metal post where it's connected to the wood, and strung it, pulled it as hard as I could, tightened it up. It's a pretty strong wire, so I didn't bother with, you know, clamps or anything, because it's gonna stay. Like, this isn't gonna come loose on its own. And then I did the same thing on the bottom. And then I did add 1 nail in between, 1 nail in the middle, just to kind of hold it up a little bit, and another nail there, just to remove a little bit of the slack. It made it easier for me to pull it a little bit tighter. And then I tied the string in between. And each string, I believe I made like 3 rounds thick. And each one of these will hold just 1 or 2, you know, plants on there. Now, here's a closer look. So here you can see up close how the wire is just tied around this part so that it's stuck really good. And then just kind of wrapped around so it stays put. Remember, this is a really strong wire, so it's gonna stay. And then I have the string tied on the wire and then brought down and tied at the bottom. And the same thing here. This is kind of one together. Tied here, wrapped around, tied in a knot, brought down to the bottom, tied in a knot, wrapped back up. And there's a little bit of a close look at the bottom, but it's just the same thing. So now I'm ready to fill the raised beds with soil. I am using a mixture of peat moss and compost, because I have peat moss and I have compost, and those make good soils for beans, so that's what I'm using. Filling it up with those, and then I'll be planting the beans. So let's get that going. Okay, so now you'll see me plant the beans, and I will be using this garden soil inoculate. So first, let's talk about the beans. Here are the different varieties that I'm growing. The Chinese, it's called Chinese red noodle long bean. These are the yard long beans that you grow, and actually you grow them until they're about 12 to 18 inches. I grew some last year. They grew really well for me. They love the heat, so I'm growing these again in one of the beds. And then I have Kentucky Wonder whole beans. Several packets of those. And then I have another packet of long beans. These are the green ones. These are called asparagus beans, yard long beans. But they work the same way. They grow long and you harvest them when they're about 18 inches long. These, I've actually grown these and measured them in the morning and then measured them in the afternoon, and you'd see like 1.5 inches of growth. It's really, really neat to watch these. So growing these again, and of course I love the taste and the texture of them. The texture is a little different from regular green beans, but delicious nonetheless. And then I have a few seeds of these Triunfo Violetto, I think they're Italian pole beans. I tried to grow them last year. They did okay, but I also didn't grow them in the optimal area. So I'm gonna grow a few this year and we'll see how they do. And so my plan is to grow these beans, and then eventually they will, you know, beans will produce for a few weeks, 4 or 5, sometimes 6 weeks, and then they'll stop or they'll slow down quite a bit. And so once they slow down, I'm gonna pull out the plants and then start a new batch so that I can continue to get beans in the fall as well. All right, so then the other thing that I'm doing, once I put the beans, you know, plant the beans on the soil, then I'll add this soil inoculant. Now, what this does, if you're not familiar with soil inoculants, this soil inoculant, it's actually a specific bacteria, and if you've grown beans, you may have heard that green beans, peas, things like that, things in the legume family, they fix nitrogen in the soil. Nitrogen for themselves to grow, and also nitrogen that they also leave behind in the soil. So when you plant something else there, there's nitrogen there for that plant. Well, they only do that if there's a certain bacteria present. And this inoculant is actually like that bacteria. So it's adding that bacteria to the soil so that the roots will form the nodules that fix the nitrogen in the soil. So this helps to aid in the production. The plants grow healthier, grow stronger, and produce more. And then it also makes sure that they have enough nitrogen to grow, and it helps to leave nitrogen behind in the soil for the next crop that you plant there. So I plan to grow beans here, and then maybe if things go well, I might even grow some sugar snaps in the cooler months. I've never grown them before, but since I'll have kind of the setup here to grow something that can grow on a pole. I wouldn't grow watermelon or anything like that vertically on these because they are string, so I know they can handle the weight of the beans, the string and the wire, and maybe the weight of some cucumbers. I may try that next year, but first I'm going to start with the beans that I know are going to be light. And that was it. There we go. And then once that's ready, I'll water it in. Okay, so you've seen me plant everything, saw me water it in. One thing that I did kind of forget is that peat moss. It's kind of hard to, like, for water to penetrate it right at first, so it's always good to pre-moisten. So my other beds, before I plant them, I'll pre-moisten the peat and then plant into it, just so that the water doesn't, like, sit and then not sink in. It does sink in eventually and it's fine, but so that my seeds stay in place, I'm going to pre-moisten that a little bit. That's something I forgot about peat that I always do when I'm using it in my for seed starting. Just a final look. All 4 beds planted. And trellis isn't quite done yet, but I'll be finishing those up in the rest of the days. But here's the one that is done. Well, I gotta add a few strings to the end. There's the rest. Gonna grow our year's worth of green beans. So here's a look at these green beans starting to climb up the trellis. It is May 21st, so it's been a little while. It took them a little while to get started, but now they're going. Hopefully they produce, the green beans produce in this heat. These are the yard long beans, and they are coming through. It took them a little bit, but these love the heat, so they're starting to grow strong. Here are more of the pole beans and the yard long beans. Okay. Yes. So in the next few weeks, I expect them to really shoot up, and should be starting to harvest them. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this video. Go ahead and hit that like, hit that subscribe, help this video get out to more gardeners, help grow this channel. I would really appreciate it. And have a great one until I see you guys again.